developed an automatic association between letters and sounds. He doesn't have to think. It's automatic. He doesn't have to think. When he sees B-A, he doesn't say, look at, no, look at, he knows that. And also it teaches the blend right over. Well, and then the third step was to simply teach the child how to sound out words, then sentences, the phrases, sentences, and then little stories. So that's the way reading was taught for centuries, was taught in the early part of this country. If you ever pick up some of the early primers published in the 1840s and the 1850s, you will see they've got the columns of the baby Bible used. And that's why they all became such incredibly good readers, because they knew their alphabet letters so well. Now, when I decided to put out a book that would enable parents to teach their child coming to read, I basically used the same method, but I decided to make some improvements. Because I felt that since our alphabetic system does have its problem, it should be taught in a certain sequence. So what I do is, assuming that the child has been taught the alphabet, what I do is I first introduce the child to the short A in conjunction with 5 consonants. And the purpose of that will become pretty obvious as we go on. But I teach the child that this letter is A. Now, if you'll notice, this A looks like a printed A. It's not a ball and stick A. It's a printed A. The child is not to copy that way. The child is to write a cursive A. When you teach the child to write, you teach the child cursive. You don't teach the child to print, you teach the child cursive. In any case, teach the child that this letter stands for A. The consonant M stands for The consonant N stands for The consonant S stands for S. Consonant T stands for T. Consonant X stands for X, which is really KS. And then you show how when you put these 2 letters together, they become am, act, as, act, acts. Now already, so the child knows 6 sounds of 5 consonants, 1 vowel, 5 to read 5 words right off the bat. Now, the reason why I do that is because I want to get them to blend as soon as possible, blending the letters so that they're not going act, could, act, to. You see. Now, what I do with the second lesson, and incidentally, I usually find that children can get through the first 3 lessons in the first session. The next lesson, we take the same letters and we put them in front of the words we've just learned. We put the S in front of am, you get am. The M in front of and, you get man. Then we introduce the letter H, which stands for the sound. We put H in front of as, and we get has. S in front of am, we get sat. T in front of tax, and we get tax. Now, of course, you must also teach vocabulary as you go along. When you get to words like tax, you explain to the child what a tax is. He or she will be paying it for the rest of his or her life. And then in lesson 3, we already begin creating spelling families. Am, sam, am, man, as, has, acts, tax. And we can write our first sentence. Sam sat, period. Sam has an act, period. So we try to get the child, and the child feels he's made tremendous accomplishment by being able to make a sentence by practically in the first lesson. And that's why I did it this way. I want the children to have this strong motivation. Well, then we expand the spelling families, add, dad, said. We introduce the letter D. Add, dad, said. Ted, am, dam, Sam, am, man, dan, ten, as, has. Then we put a little box around W-A-S because that's not was. It's was. Now, children have no problem learning that W-A-S is sentence, they understand it very nicely. And by lesson 6, they're reading such sentences as Dan has an axe, Dan has ham, Sam sat, has dad an axe, etc., etc. In other words, they are only reading words, the letters of which they already know. They know these letters, they know the sounds, and so they can read phonetically. They're learning to read phonetically. And then we introduce other letters, we introduce the rest of the consonants, and then we give the youngster plenty of drill. We introduce the CK, we introduce the word and constantly we are expanding the sentences. And then by lesson 14, we give them every possible combination of the short A with consonants. The beginning consonant letter and the final consonant letter. Now, many of these syllables are nonsense syllables, but they will turn up in multisyllabic words later on. For example, that is not a word, but it's part of Baptist, you see. Well, thou is not a word, but it'll later turn up into thous. And in other words, everything the child learns will be with that child for the rest of his or her life. Everything that is learned here will remain in that child's mind as part of something to be learned permanently. The worst thing that you can do in education is to teach a child something that later has to be unlearned. And this is done constantly by our schools. Who teach, they teach printing and then say, okay, forget about printing. We're not going to, you have to unlearn the way you've been writing printing, now you're going to write cursive. That's ridiculous. And never permit a child to develop a bad habit. If you ever try to break a bad habit, it's impossible. So just don't let your child develop a bad habit. Make sure that child learns to hold the pen correctly to begin with. Make sure that when you're teaching spelling, you teach correct spelling. Wow. Now we move along, and in lesson 15 we introduce the rest of the short vowels. And we do that by showing the contrast in spelling families. Etc. The children learn the different letter sounds very nicely.
Sam, could we possibly go into the question and answer session now?
Okay. Well, anyway, this gives you an idea of how the system works. After we complete the short vowels, we go into the consonant blends, and then we save the long vowels for last. Why? Because there's more than one way to write a long A, for example. There's simple A, there's A consonant E, there's AI, there's EI, there's EIGH, and so because we have these multiple ways of writing the same letter, sound, we save it for last. By that time, the children learn. Once they complete this, they can read their written language, they can read anything. And that's why I highly recommend that you get this book and teach your child at home so that your child will become a literate human being and become an objective, accurate, phonetic reader.
Thank you very much, Sam. Anybody feels like this is Sam a little what we'd like to do is those people who have questions, go ahead and send them down to the middle of the aisle. And now go by, pick them up, and Sam will go ahead and answer them. And those of you who would like to go to the back of the room or would like to leave right now, that's fine. Anything you'd like to do. But we're trying to wrap up here around 9:30, okay? Let me take that. Anybody need anybody have some questions?
Give me some of this stuff. The question is, do the teachers in the public schools know what is going on with OE, or are they being used as pawns to promote the humanist agenda? Well, a lot of these teachers are sold a bill of goods. I have a great respect for those teachers who have spent years in the schools trying to do the best they can. There are many good, fine teachers in the schools. But they're as much victims of this system as the children are. They don't have control over what they have to teach is mandated. There are some teachers who actually do teach phonics, who shut the door to make sure that the principal doesn't see what's going on. And they will teach phonics. There are those brave teachers who do that. But I'm afraid that many of the teachers have been so brainwashed, because I have spoken to teachers. Mary, I spoke to a group of teachers in Michigan last time I was here. And the hostility that they showed to me, they simply would not believe anything I said. For example, when I pointed out that there were so many millions of functional illiterates in the United States and showed them the documentation, they said it's all lies. They just would not believe it. So what do you do in these sort of circumstances? You hope that the teacher will have open minds and will be willing to see what's going on. You said on WJR today that many children diagnosed with ADD cannot sit still because they understand something bad is happening to them. Please expound on this. Well, as I explained, the methods that they use in the schools today to teach reading are the equivalent of a non-surgical prefrontal lobotomy. They're destroying the brain of the child. And we have proof of this. I can show you evidence how this dumbing down process takes place on perfectly healthy, normal children regress as a result of the way that they talk. Now, they know that something is happening to them. They don't know what it is. All they know is that when they entered school, they felt very intelligent. 6 months in a year, they begin to feel dumb. They begin to feel stupid. They know that it's the school that's doing it to them, because when they're out of the school, they feel much better. And when they're in the school, they feel a certain tension, because what is being done to them goes so completely against their logic, their sense of logic and common sense, that they react. Now, would you sit still if somebody was trying to perform a prefrontal lobotomy on you? So why do you expect kids to sit still and take it? So the act of that is their defense. That's the only defense they have, because mother says, you must go to school, you must listen to your teacher. So what defense does a child have? He or she acts up, and what is the solution that the educators offer? Let's drug the little animal. So they give the kid Ritalin, and he becomes a little zombie in the classroom, where the operation can be performed without any resistance. So that's what goes on. That's my analysis. Perhaps you have another explanation, but that's mine. What grade level does alphaphonics completion equal to? Well, I'd say that if you were done with alphaphonics, you would probably be in the 2nd grade. In the old days, we learned to read. We pretty well knew our alphabet and letter sound by the 2nd grade, and we're reading practically anything. By the end of the 2nd grade, we could read practically anything out loud. Do you believe every teacher is aware of their purpose in the public school? Well, obviously not. Some are part of it. Some are self-proclaimed change agents. You've heard that word used, change agents. They've gone to seminars. They've gone to training sessions where they have been taught to be change agents. They've been indoctrinated in what is going on in the schools. Those teachers know. Now, they may think that it's great. They certainly don't believe that they're doing evil. But they're misguided, I must say. There's no other way to describe it. They're being mistaught. And the thing is, they trust their professors. They trust the people who are teaching them that they will not be taught to do wrong. And many of these teachers are just inexperienced enough. They have not lived enough. They don't have the wisdom to know what is really the right way to do it. They've never had phonics themselves. They never had cursive writing themselves. Many of them are, believe it or not, semi-literate. According to, I would say, the standards that I was brought up with, they would be considered semi-literate. So, it's hard to be condemning them all, and all I say is that they are part of the system, they are trained to be in it, and if they want to stay in the system, they just have to do what they're told. There are a lot of people in the private school system that are excited about vouchers. I have heard that this is just another way for government to get into the private schools. Would you address this, please? Yes, yes, I would agree with that. I would say that the idea that vouchers is going to really free up the system may be misguided, because you and I know that if you take a single nickel from the government owns, and then the courts have said so, if you take any money from the government, they have the right to regulate you. So a private school takes money from the government, or even takes a voucher, the courts have said that that school is subject to federal regulation. Now, what does that mean? It means that the government will be able to regulate private schools. Now, my view is that we ought to get the government out of the education business, not what it should be. Another point must be made, and that is parents now have choice. You can homeschool, you can put your child in a private school, in a parochial school. You have choice now. You don't need a voucher. The idea that homeschoolers should be paid by the government, do you know what that means? They'll be able to walk into your home at any time. They'll be able to control your curriculum. It's ridiculous for homeschoolers to believe that they'll be able to get money from the government without any regulation of the kinds of people who now inhabit our government. It's silly to think that way. Your comment on Waco. They should have knocked on the door, or ATF men got killed. Everyone knew the compound was heavily armed. Please explain. Well, look, if you have a search warrant given by a court, and you want to see what's in that building, what is the first method, the sanest, most logical method that you use? You go to the front door, and you knock. And somebody opens the door, and you say, we have a search warrant. We would like to search the premises because we have reason to believe that there are some violations of some laws going on here. That wasn't done. What they did instead was design or plan a full-scale military attack. A military attack on this compound. Nobody in there was guilty of anything. It was just suspicion that there was some illegal or some violations of law. The use of some of the arms. Now, the Davidians were in the arms business. That was one of the ways they made their money. They attended these arms fairs, these, what do you call them, these gun shows. These gun shows are held all over the place, particularly in Texas. They're very popular. And that's one of the ways they made their money. Now, you could say that somebody who owns a gun store is heavily armed. Well, that's what was with the Davidians. Yeah, they were heavily armed. They had all their merchandise. Their inventory was there. That's what that was. Their inventory. And what did they do? They attacked the compound with guns, with tanks, with helicopters. 3 men, you see this film on Waco, this video, what does it show? It shows 3 of the ATF men crawling into a window. And then it shows an ATF man firing into that same window. Did he know that there were 3 of his fellow ATF men in there? He did, because he was on the roof and they crawled in. Was he firing at his own men? He threw a grenade into that window. Was he killing his own men? Why was he doing that? Do you know who those 3 men were? Those 3 men were Clinton's bodyguards during the campaign. Interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. So there's much more that meets the eye here. And there was a 4th man, a 4th bodyguard, who was killed accidentally before all this happened. It's a very strange story. It shows the man throwing a grenade in the window. It shows him firing into the window, then crawling down and so weird. This is so frightening to think that something like this could happen. That all of that was staged. Now, it's possible that the people inside the compound knew what had happened. We don't know, were those bodies brought out? Were they ever brought out? Of the 3 men who had crawled in? I don't know. Never heard anything about the bodies being brought out. I've never heard anyone really identify them in the press who they were. And then, what happened during the assault, the final assault? They got orders from Washington to pump gas, lethal gas, into a compound full of innocent people. Because as far as we know, and incidentally 6 of the Davidians had been killed during that attack. As far as we know, everyone was innocent there. Certainly the women and children were innocent. Would you say the children were innocent? Janet Reno was so concerned with the children. Would you pump gas, lethal gas, and endanger the lives of those people simply to get out a couple of people who you think may have done something wrong? That's what the Nazis used to do. If they knew that there was a partisan who had blown up a Nazi train and that he was hiding among the people, what did they do? They killed everybody just to get the one man they wanted. Now that's totally against the American way. We assume that we would rather let a criminal go free than kill 80 innocent people, including 20 children. That's supposed to be the American way, is it not? Well, you look at this film and judge for yourself. And if you don't think that President Clinton ought to be impeached for ordering the attack on that building of innocence, if you think that what Nixon did with Watergate is so terrible, then what happened in Waco is far, far worse. All right, let's get back to reading. But I do urge you to get that film. God knows how long it will be available. God knows if they will even what will happen. We're living in very dangerous times. And I don't know how much longer they'll let me speak here. I don't know how much longer I was able to speak. Okay, I think you want to probably be able to
just take a few more questions, about 10 minutes, and we'll
10 minutes more questions? Okay. Here's one. Is critical thinking a New Age or obe term? Why? Because Bloom's taxonomy is used in some critical thinking schemes. Well, the whole purpose of critical thinking is to make the kids criticize everything that's traditional. Criticize the Bible, criticize their religions. That's critical thinking comes from the philosophers of the age of reason, the men who overthrew traditional, who wanted to overthrow religion. That was the whole purpose of critical thinking, of criticism, of undermining the Bible, undermining Scripture. And that's what they're teaching the kids. What they should be teaching the kids is logical thinking, clear thinking. You don't become a critical thinker until you're an adult and have enough information and knowledge and wisdom before you can be a critical thinker. But before you can then become a critical thinker, you have to become a clear thinker, a logical thinker. And notice, logic is no longer taught in American schools because we live in an illogical age. And if you apply logic to it, as we do, then you become a right-wing extremist. That's what happens. What is Bloom's taxonomy? The 6 points. Well, I don't want to go into that. That's much too technical now. But I would advise You learn about false ideas. For example, the reason why we have public education is because the men who invented it said it will eliminate crime. It will create utopia. It's a means of salvation of the human race. Well, here we are, 150 years later. Were they right or were they wrong? They were wrong. That's how you learn from history. But they're not going to teach history in our schools. In OBE. They don't teach history. What they're going to do is solve problems and only refer to history when it's relevant to solving a particular problem. And you can imagine what they're going to draw out of history. But history is your means of gaining wisdom because you can look at the lives that were lived in the past, see their mistakes, their triumphs, their failures, and learn. Those are the lessons that history has to tell. Okay. Why are private Christian schools buying into OBE voluntarily? I really don't know why they're doing it. I guess they're being sold by a very, very persuasive salesman. The only reason I can think of. How long will it take for 7th and 8th grade boys newly homeschooled to be deprogrammed? Oh, for 7th and 8th grade. I don't know. I suppose maybe a couple of months, maybe even less time. One of the things I'd like to advise homeschoolers is that do not try to replicate a public school in your home. Do not set up a blackboard in the basement and have your kids sit in the seat in front of you and stand in front of the others with a ruler or pointing and teach. You're trying to make that child into a passive learner the way they do it in school. Don't play school. If you want your child to learn, teach them the basic academic skills and say, hey, you want to learn about this? You want to learn about that? Let's go to the library. Let's get the books out. Let your child become an active learner. You won't have burnout. You'll be able to relax. It won't be as difficult as you think it is because the child is used to teaching himself. Remember, every child taught himself to speak his own language. Nobody had to do it for him. He didn't sit in front of somebody and point to and said, this is how you speak. So children are natural self-teachers. Just give them the freedom to teach themselves. Now, some kids may want more structure than others. That depends on the nature of the character of the child. You have to be the judge. But basically, don't wear yourself out by trying to do too much. Just do what you can do and let nature take its own.